Hey, welcome everyone. All right. Hey, welcome. Excited for everyone to be here. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. We will wait for everyone to get here, but I want to make sure that, okay. All right. So we've got a few people here, and let's see. Okay, cool. So everyone should be muted. If you need to ask any questions or anything, you might want to use the chat box. If not, then you can hit the space bar if you're on a PC, and that should unmute your mic. Not sure how to do it on a phone yet. I haven't actually attended a Zoom meeting on a phone, so ironically. Okay. So today we're talking about hypnotic language patterns, and the reason that this is valuable regardless of what your industry is due to the nature of the science behind the patterns and how they work. Very, very cool modality to be able to speak to anyone and be a little bit more influential, a little bit more persuasive, just based upon the causal linking phrases that you are able to utilize and things of that nature. So very, very cool. Let's see. All right. Does everyone have the slideshow first slide that says hypnotic language patterns up on your screen? Okay, awesome. Thank you, guys. So we will go ahead and get started here. So what is hypnosis? Very, very, very important for us to establish what we're exactly talking about. And hey, Omar, welcome. So hypnotic, this is our first slide, so you haven't missed anything, Omar. What is hypnosis? Hypnotic linguistic phrases cause the human mind to experience a hypnotic trance, sometimes referred to as a focused mental state, and often accompanied by behavioral compliance. But a trance is simply a highly focused state of attention. Many people will even tell you that a trance state isn't anything special. It's not actually a thing. But we have actually hooked people up to brain scanners, and the brain waves do change state whenever people are experiencing what they would refer to as a hypnotic trance state. And the theta brain waves are much more active in those states. So whether or not it's an actual state of mind that we go into, or whether or not it's an experience that we have, it's really, really irrelevant. But it's basically, it happens whenever a pattern of language focuses the attention and turns it inward into the imagination. The dark side of hypnosis and hypnotic language patterns, it's worth discussing the dark side because politicians, advertisers, and cult leaders are all well aware of hypnotic language patterns. And although it takes real determination to become skilled, deliberate, and masterful, a basic familiarity with these patterns can help you to defend yourself against those who don't necessarily have your best interests at heart. What hypnosis is not, it's very important to take a moment and just get this out of the way because there are so many really well-educated people who are afraid of hypnosis. And why would any well-educated professional be afraid to use a standard term that has a long and studied history? Well, often this issue comes from a common misunderstanding that hypnosis might have something to do with dark magic, sinister arts, witchcraft, a superpower, a gift, or as something only heavyweight linguists can comprehend and practice. That is not what hypnosis is, okay? Has nothing to do with any of those things. It's not dark magic, it's not witchcraft, it's not a superpower. It is just understanding how language causes someone's mind to go inward into the imagination and how to do that through causal chains and links. So it has nothing to do with anything else. Okay, stop. What is the most important aspect of any type of neuro-linguistic programming technology or hypnosis technology? The most important thing that you always have to make sure that you know that you have done and know how to do is to create a well-formed outcome. As a practitioner or someone interested in learning how to use language patterns to better communicate with children, colleagues, romantic partners, let's see. Yes, you got to know where you're going. Thank you. Absolutely. Romantic partners, clients, etc. You must understand how to develop well-formed outcomes to actually succeed and confirm success. So chances are you won't be causing anyone to cluck like a chicken anytime soon. So follow the peer model. I've introduced this concept to my clients, to my students, to anybody who's interested, and I learned this template from Coach Mayur Bardola from India, and I believe it's one of the easiest and most simple ways to create a well-formed outcome. So just remember the acronym PURE. Make sure that whatever your outcome is, that you know how to positively state it. In other words, state the outcome that you do want, not what you don't want. Make sure that it's under your control so that you know that you are the one that is going to be focused on your own state of mind and what you're wanting to accomplish. I can't control whether or not somebody actually goes into a hypnotic trance or actually responds to my inductions. What I can focus on is how excited I'll be when I actually do articulate the hypnotic language patterns exactly the way that I want to, in the manner that I want to, and toward the goal that I want. So I have control over all of that, but I don't have control over whether or not somebody actually is persuaded by me. Make sure that it's real so that you're focusing on what you do want and stating it in a way that you can clearly see it, you can hear what it would be like if it were done, and you know what it would feel like at the end once you get that outcome that you're looking for. And finally, ensure that it's ecologically balanced. Make sure that you, first of all, have given yourself permission to go for this. Make sure that it won't hurt anyone around you or the person you're working with, and that it will only leave that person balanced. And I always say, do no harm, leave everyone better than you found them. Okay, let's talk about permission and consent. Most important aspect of hypnosis is that it's a social contract. So if you are not someone who understands emotional intelligence very well, then chances are you probably won't even understand whether or not you have gotten consent from someone unless you just know how to blatantly ask for it, okay? So whenever we're talking about permission and consent, the first aspect of consent is rapport. And the best example of rapport that I can give to someone is when you first meet somebody and you extend your hand to say hi. Whenever that person extends their hand back to shake yours, that's your first sign of rapport. That means that we are in a social contract as of this moment. I provided and offered my hand to you. You consented by reaching out, taking it, and shaking it. So we have established our first level of rapport. Now that doesn't mean that you've gotten ultimate consent yet. It just means that the social contract has started. We've begun. One of the reasons why salespeople always say get 2 or 3 yeses at the beginning of a conversation is because that's what they're doing. They're creating that rapport. They're creating that mechanism in the brain that gets used to saying yes to me and even makes them feel good about it, okay? So asking permission in order for hypnosis to be effective is actually demonstrated by the rapport between the audience and the practitioner. It depends upon the amount of trust that the audience has in the practitioner. Many hypnotic language patterns have been studied alongside interest in the work of Milton H. Erickson, who pioneered the indirect or permissive style of hypnosis. And hypnosis, it's not just a good practice to always ask for permission before beginning to use hypnotic language patterns. It's an ethical necessity, okay? So before you begin using some of these techniques, make sure you have permission. Just get it out of the way, especially if you're new to this. always make sure that it's okay for you to use hypnotic language patterns. And you don't have to call them hypnotic language patterns unless you just feel like it's necessary. I don't typically. I just say, listen, I have a few different techniques that I use in order to help people get on the other side of something like this. Would you be okay with me walking you through some of those now? And that in nature is just asking for consent. That's the way I do it. Find something that makes sense to you, and I promise that it will be super easy and feel natural. It will flow right out of you. Okay, these are direct hypnotic patterns, and I do not recommend that you use them. I just want you to know what they are so that you can get an idea when you hear these, or so that you can get rid of some of the misconceptions that you probably have about them. So, before Erickson, hypnosis subjects were basically given a pattern interrupt. If you don't know what a pattern interrupt is, then you might want to go ahead and take a note now to go to YouTube after you finish watching this and to search my name, James Pesch, and pattern interrupts. I have a couple of workshops that I conducted at Hardesty Public Library and things of that nature, so that would be free to let you have an idea of what a pattern interrupt is. The other way is that they're given a visual anchor to focus on and told directly what to do or feel. So, for example, you are feeling sleepy. So they would say, I want you to focus on the watch or this spot on the wall. And then they'll say, and while you're looking at that spot, you'll notice you're feeling sleepy. And that's very direct, okay? This approach works seemingly like magic for certain people, but it's only around 30% of the population. About 30% of the population are easily susceptible to this type of direction, and it still depends heavily on the rapport between the subject and the practitioner. There has to be that good social clicking there. But as soon as that's there, the 30% of the population is just boom. They can just go into a trance state or a social compliance state super easy. But direct language patterns, the internal imaginative reality of the listener is unlikely to match what is being said to them if the suggestions are too specific or controversial. So a practitioner might directly instruct the listener to imagine relaxing on a beautiful beach with golden sand, but perhaps the beach in their imagination is not golden. I know that whenever I was in New Zealand, all the beaches on the east coast of the island were black sand beaches due to the lava and the way that it had all, the currents and everything on the west coast was golden sand. But if you had been trying to get me to relive one of my days whenever I visited Kafia, then it would have to be black sand beach. So if you're starting to tell me that I'm relaxing on a beautiful beach with golden sand, then I may not agree with that, and it may not be as easy for you to access my imagination. Or perhaps someone got lost on a beach as a child and have hated beaches ever since. That this is not going to be relaxing to them at all, okay? So the discrepancy between what's being said and what's going on inside the head of the listener will disrupt the hypnotic trance, and any useful suggestions the speaker might make will or could be lost, ignored, or refused. So that's why I don't encourage direct language patterns. And now we'll get into the more indirect and permissive language patterns that I do recommend and teach. So here is indirect and permissive hypnosis. Indirect language patterns work in two ways. First, by structuring language in such a way that the listener's attention is focused and turns inward, where it will search for meaning. The direct way of hypnosis would be you are feeling relaxed and sleepy. Indirect sounds more like this. And perhaps as you sit there now, listening to the sound of my voice here, you might begin to notice a pleasant feeling of peaceful relaxation. Why does it work? Well, causal phrases are very important. As you can see in this slide, as you sit there now listening to the sound of my voice here, so I've already gone ahead and stated things that are occurring. This is called pacing and leading in NLP. So these causal chains, at no point are you being directly told that you're experiencing something. You are never commanded to do something. The listener might be invited indirectly to notice something, and the brain begins seeking ways to understand. So the causal phrases, here's an example. If there's an either at the beginning of a thought, our brains instinctively seek the or, which will be following, which turns the cognitive attention inward to see what feelings are being noticed, which of course is inherently trance-inducing. Why does it work? Presuppositions are very important. So indirect language patterns work in two ways. The first is indirect hypnotic language is permissive, which means that you're given maximum freedom to interpret what is being said to you in a way that makes sense to you personally, but uses presuppositions in order to increase rapport and influence. So here's another example. You can imagine relaxing on a beautiful golden beach. An indirect example would be, now, as you may have already noticed, there will have been a time and a place in your life where you felt perfectly relaxed and completely at ease. And I wonder if you're able to get a sense of that right now. So that is a lot of presuppositions. So I said, now, as you may have already noticed, presupposing that it's possible that there was something to already have noticed. There will have been a time and place. I'm presupposing that for sure this person has relaxed at some point. And then I go ahead and make that even more solidified by saying you felt perfectly relaxed and completely at ease. And I wonder if you're able to get a sense of that now. That I wonder if you're able is more, the wonder is on their ability to get a sense of that, not whether or not it's happening. So I'm wondering if they're able to get a sense of that right now. And the now, you will notice in my tonality that it's a command rather than a question. I wonder if you're able to get a sense of that right now. Okay, we'll learn a little bit more about pacing and leading. So I've got a few of the people in here that have been in my life coaching classes, and this is something that we teach in order to help people unlock a lot of tools themselves on the, instinctively, internally, we have ways of the mind soothing ourselves. And this is one of the tools that we use in neuro-linguistic programming. So pacing and leading is a communication tool designed to feed back or pace the experience of what is happening. And once rapport is demonstrably evident, using the pace to link across to a lead, to what is desired as an outcome, as if the two were connected. So that's what we mean by causal phrasing, okay? So here's the pace lead model. And you can just follow the boxes all the way through the end. As you sit there now, that's a pace, because chances are whoever you're speaking to in this setting, they're sitting. So you're merely narrating what is happening. So as you sit there now, listening to the sound of my voice here. So I do include the location quite often as here, because that again is a third lead or a third pace that I'm including, because I'm saying, as you sit there now, listening to the sound of my voice here in this place. So there are three factors right now that the brain is trying to follow, that all three of these things are interconnected. Now I lead into the next thing that is still connected and contingent upon the previous three things. You might begin to notice a pleasant feeling. So that's permissive in nature. And it's also the lead, the thing that I want them to feel. So they are sitting, they are listening to the sound of my voice, they are here. Now I want them to put those three things together to force them or cause them or allow them to begin to notice a pleasant feeling. Does anyone have any questions on that template? It's a very simple concept, but until you've practiced it a little bit, it is not something that comes naturally. Okay, we'll move on to the next slide. Okay, so you guys, a few of you have seen this before. Here's the science behind why this works. The attention is focused inward as the listener sorts through their own experiences to find a memory of a time when they did feel perfectly relaxed. By focusing and remembering that time, of course, the limbic system and mirror neurons generate the feelings they had at that time, reproducing that sense of relaxation in the present moment now. So what are the implications? You've seen this diagram before. The red circle on the brain is what lights up whenever we are ourselves performing any activity. So if I'm doing it, that red portion lights up. If I'm watching somebody else do it, or I'm witnessing the action, the green portion lights up in the brain. And if I'm just hearing about it, don't have to be seeing it, the yellow portion lights up. Now, these portions of the brain are the amygdala and the hippocampus. Whenever those two areas of the brain are activated, that whatever is happening there is becoming committed to long-term memory. Very, very important, because that's how we get from a state of unconscious incompetence down to unconscious competence. So that's the final level, is whenever something is committed to our long-term memory. Okay, let's talk about some of the linguistic tools of the trade. These are 3 different areas that are all sort of related, but we start with the yes sets. Then we move into truisms and tag questions. And then finally, we'll end with illusory choices and double binds. So once you get a good idea of what yes sets are, truisms, tag questions, illusory choices, and double binds, then you can begin including them in almost any conversation to make you more persuasive, more influential. One of the ways that I see this done quite often that really irritates me is when someone is having a conversation and 2 people are kind of disagreeing but trying to get on the same page, and one person that's trying to make their case every time at the end of their sentence says, right? That is something that just, it's so blatantly, blaringly obvious when someone's like, well, that's why you do it this way, right? And then whenever this happens to these types of people, they do this, right? And that's why this happens in here, right? So every time they're saying that, they are trying to get a confirmation at the end of, yes, I'm in agreement with you, but they're making it sound like you understand what I'm saying. And so it's just blaring. So you don't want it to be like that. You want this to be very natural. You want it to flow off the tongue easily, and you want it to not be something that's easy to spot, okay? So yes sets are any statements which you can't help but agree with, since they're self-evidently true, so that you're more likely to agree with whatever comes next. These phrases are commonly used as pacing statements in the pacing and leading template, okay? So here's an example. So you've come here this morning. Yes. And you're sitting in that chair now. Yes. Listening to the sound of my voice. Yes. And already this allows you to begin to understand more and more what yes sets are. I'm going to repeat that. This is a yes set. So you've come here this morning, yes, and you're sitting in that chair now, yes, listening to the sound of my voice, yes, and already this forces you to begin to understand hypnotic language patterns and yes sets even more than ever before. All right, any questions on yes sets? Maybe does anyone have any yes sets that they prefer to utilize? Okay. Truisms and tag questions. Truisms are related to yes sets and are aspects of behavior or experience which cannot reasonably be denied. Here's an example. You, like so many others, already know how to relax. So I'm using the so many others as basically it allows the person to put themselves in that category with so many others. And then the universal concept of relax is unique to each individual. However, almost everyone has experienced it at some point. So when bringing up something like that, that's why I say, I don't introduce the idea of a golden sandy beach when I'm trying to get someone to relax. I just introduce the concept of knowing how to relax. Now, tag questions are questions that you add on. But they call them a tag because it's just like if you tag keywords on an Instagram or Twitter post and you use the hashtag, you're tagging questions. It's at what you just lump it on at the end. So those questions are like, don't you, at the end of a previous sentence. So it presupposes or assumes that any vague or ambiguous statement before it or after it is a true fact, making the suggestions less direct and easier to accept. So you, like so many others, already know how to relax, don't you? So it's a presupposition at the end. It's a post-supposition. You, like so many others, already know how to relax, don't you? And I use this quite often with some of my clients who are depressives. If they are basically saying they never have fun, they don't enjoy life, they're depressed all the time, I'll start asking questions along the lines of, so tell me, you, like so many others, definitely know when you're having fun and when you're in a good mood, don't you? And then I'll wait because I want their brain to find that. I want them to internally start looking for that emotional state, because once they find it, they can't help but experience it. Just like if I were to say, don't imagine a black cat running across the screen. Once you identify what was said and translate it, your brain does it automatically. You can't stop the process. So that's why I'm doing that. And I'm forcing that feeling, that state, that emotion, and retraining the limbic system at the same time. All right, so let's talk about the last tool of the trade, illusory choices and double binds. Illusory choices and double binds presuppose that you will perform a task or feel a sensation or experience an image, and the only question being when. Now, here's an example of that. Now, I don't know whether you will relax now or in a moment. The question forces the mind to choose between the two provided options, rather than notice that the listener doesn't necessarily have to relax at all. In debate or in formal logic, we would call this a false dichotomy. Illusory choice or double bind oftentimes is a false dichotomy because we're not dealing with binary systems, like everything is either A or not A. That is a true dichotomy. And this would be an example of a false dichotomy. Knowing the difference between the two is really comes in handy whenever you've got somebody who offers you a false dichotomy so that you don't have to accept it. But most people, they will make a choice when offered a binary option. They will make some sort of choice and decide. Here's an example of a double bind. You've been well behaved today, as this is from a parent's perspective. You've been well behaved today. Would you rather go to bed at 8 or 8:30? Now, my son is clever, and now he always picks something else. He's picked up on this, that the double bind doesn't necessarily apply to him unless, you know, unless I prove it. So that once people become a little bit aware of that, then you might not want to use the double binds and the false dichotomies anymore. But as for now, they're relatively handy. That's pretty much all we have as far as hypnotic language patterns and the tools. And I do want to go ahead and recap just a bit on the pacing and leading model and open up this time now if anybody has any questions. For me, the yes sets are the easiest way to understand pacing and leading and understand what's happening inside the mind while you're using pacing and leading. So that way you can kind of see it. You're saying, as you sit there now, yes, listening to the sound of my voice, yes, here, yes. This forces you to begin to, and that's into my lead. So really, really important to understand what's happening in the mind of the audience and how many times you're getting the yes. Brandon has noticed a lot of times, and Brandon's on here as well, that whenever I'm working with clients or whenever I'm teaching, that I oftentimes will use what he calls the Jedi nod, where I'm doing this slight little nod. Great question. Okay, so Aaron asked, how do we make sure that we bring people out of a trance state and make sure that there are no loose ends? It's very, very, very important to actually understand this, and that is why I always begin every lesson plan with the most important aspect of neuro-linguistic programming or hypnotic language patterns: well-formed outcomes. So how do you know when you're finished? How do you know whenever you've completed the entire process? Well, you should have a well-formed outcome in mind. So you should absolutely know when you've arrived at the end, when you have completely gone through every single aspect of what it is you're trying to accomplish with the audience that you're speaking to. If you've done a good job in creating a positively stated, under your control, real, ecologically balanced outcome, then when you arrive there, you absolutely will know it because you will have pre-planned it. Now, the easiest and best method to use for that, I always allow for a hypnotic induction. Okay, and Brandon, I'll answer that in just a second. Brandon, let me finish up on this portion. So specifically in dealing with bringing people out of hypnotic trance, I always leave them with a post-hypnotic induction at that time and just allow them to accept it and then ask me questions about anything that's not clear. So I'll say, now as you're basically coming back to the present moment and beginning to absorb everything that has happened and occurred here today, I want you to begin to look internally and ask yourself if there's anything that you'd like clarification on, and check now whether or not that's something that I can help with. And that's typically how I end the session, and just kind of allow them to take a moment. And that normally takes a good three or 4 minutes of silence where they're coming out of it and coming back to themselves. And occasionally, if they have gone fully under into trance, I will do the count them backwards from a staircase from 5. So I'll just basically say, you know, pretend that you're walking back up a staircase, entering back into the room, entering into your life in 1. And then whenever I get to 5, you'll be at the top of the staircase. And as you begin to step up in 2, and then I'll just walk them back up, and then just 5, and snap, and then out. That's very rare. I don't typically make people, or don't typically have people go into trance anymore. Use conversational hypnosis more often. Okay, Brandon asked, can you give a specific example of selling something with hypnotic language that ties all that? as you sit, for example, as you sit there now and hear my voice, you may begin to realize you want to buy my product today or something like that. Actually, it's perfect, Brandon. You're giving a perfect example. As you read from left to right and begin to notice that feeling of anticipation welling up on the inside of you, this will allow you to begin to notice how my product will actually solve many of your needs. That's a very, very good template that you laid out. And you'll see that I did as your eyes move from left to right, and as you begin to notice whatever. That's really important for everyone to get, because not everyone's always going to be listening to the sound of my voice. Not everyone's always going to be sitting. But if they're on Facebook or social media or they're reading my ad, then their eyes are moving from left to right and things of that nature. So there's different ways that you can begin those pacing, but you want to make sure that they're not contrary to anything that's actually happening. So I hope that kind of cleared that up. If not, then definitely let me know. And while we're wrapping up here, because we've got a few more minutes remaining here. Thank you. Okay, good. Brandon said that made sense. Okay. Any more questions? I really like the yes sets, and practice those quite often if you can. And obviously adding tag questions to the end oftentimes is very good as well. And we'll go ahead and be wrapping up here in just a few minutes. All right, guys. So that was a short little webinar on hypnotic language patterns. Have fun with them. That's the most important thing. Make sure that you do your best to always ask for permission. Make sure that you are doing your best to create a well-formed outcome before you begin trying to use them. Because if you don't, I was discussing this with Aaron yesterday at the health fair. If you don't have a well-formed outcome in mind and you haven't clearly made that in your mind, this will become recursive. It will spin you into a loop. These hypnotic language patterns are designed to necessarily be contingent one upon the other. So they will, as you begin speaking, they are going to become layered and very thick, and there will be a lot. You'll start noticing as you get good at this how you will start layering in causal chain on causal chain on causal chain, and pacing and pacing and pacing and pacing for a lot before you get to your lead, more and more, because it's necessary for you to do that in order to bypass that cognitive resistance that so often happens in conversation. And that's why it's important to make sure you have your well-formed outcome in mind, because as you allow yourself to become more natural at this and instinctive, it's going to become harder and harder for you to keep track even of all of the layers that you're layering in. And it's not necessary for you to keep up with it, because they're not keeping up with it. That's why you're able to do it. All right, guys. Thank you so much for being here. I am going to save this file and upload it again to a private link on YouTube. If you want that, then obviously let me know, and I am happy to provide you a link for that. And also any of the webinars that you've missed up to this point, just send me a message and I can send you those as well. But thanks, guys. Please enjoy your day, enjoy your week. And if you need me for anything at all, or you just want to sit down and have a cup of coffee, reach out to me. I appreciate you. Have a great day.